Hey guys, this is Andrew with rockclass101.com, and in this week's ukulele lesson, Matt's going to be teaching you a finger-picking etude that's going to help you with two aspects, and those two aspects are pacing and space. So let's break down what that actually means. Now, let's talk about the latter first, space. A lot of times when we're playing music, we feel like we have to fill up all of the space with notes or chords. Like we cannot have any dead space, right? Well, sometimes having that dead space actually adds a lot to the music. And you can hear that dead space right at the beginning of this tune. Ba-da-da-da. Right? We can hear that right at the very beginning of this. And so we get to work on that aspect right at the get-go, which is super duper cool. Now, the second thing that this tune helps you out with is pacing. So just how I sang it. Right? You can hear it's just a relaxed, chill kind of vibe to it, right? We're not going right? We're not rushing through anything. We just have this kind of slow, chill groove to it. So you're going to be working on both of those aspects with this piece, which is really, really cool. Pacing and space. All right, so let's take a step back now and let's talk a little bit about this lesson. So in this video, Matt's going to be teaching you how to play the entire piece, but if you want to get the tabs to print off and follow along with, that's going to be available at this link right here, or you can go to the site rockclass101.com, do a search for Fingerpicking Etude number 33. Now also on that page will be the really cool interactive on-screen tab viewer. Now this is a great feature where you can hit play, watch the tab scroll across in real time, highlight bars to loop sections, slow it down to any speed you want. Just a great asset in learning this song that much easier. All right guys, so I'm going to go ahead and hand it off to Matt to teach you how to play this. Don't forget to grab the low G ukulele for this, and then I'll catch you at the end of the video.
Hello, my name is Matt Dahlberg, and in today's video we're going to be working on this really fun bluesy fingerpicking etude that's designed to teach pacing and space within your playing. Let's go ahead and dive into Melody A. This is for low G ukulele, a little different than the high G I usually play with, but sounds really good for this blues style. We're going to start with this A chord, middle finger here on the second fret of the G string, index finger here on the first fret of the C string. As far as my playing hand is concerned, I'm going to be using what's called 3-finger picking, which means my middle finger will play the A string, index will play the E string, and my C string will be played by my thumb, as well as my G string with the thumb. So the thumb kind of alternates back and forth with the middle and index fingers sort of stationed. So I'm going to start by playing the 2 on the G here with my thumb, and the 1 on the C with my thumb, open on the E with the index, and now 3 on the E, adding that ring finger there, doing that with my index finger. And that's the entirety of the first measure, because that note's just going to ring out for the rest of it. And in time that should sound something like this. 2 and 3 and 4 and... Now as we go on the second measure, we're going to continue holding this 3 on the E string. And then after we've held it for a beat and a half, we're then going to play the 3 again. Then we're going to play 2 on the E with our middle finger here. And then we're going to do a hammer-on to 3 with the ring finger, and then pull off, and then open on the E string. This is an especially little difficult part because of how quick everything happens. What really helps me play it is I play this 3 with the ring, and I try to put my middle finger on the 2 before I need it. And then I play the 2, do the hammer on, and then I do a pull off to 2, and do another pull off to open to make it an easier transition. So I only have to pluck that note once at the beginning of that phrase. Then when I come back, I'm going to go on to 2 on the E string, and then my index finger is going to go here to 2 on the C string to finish this measure. Now, because these are triplet 16th notes, surrounded by 8th notes, it can be really hard to get the timing on this really good, especially when it's really slow. At that full speed, you can really hear that vibe and that feel. When we do it slow, it can sound a little clunky, and that's okay. But in time, measure 2 should sound something like this. 2 and 3 and 4 and. And then measures 1 and 2 together should sound something like this. 2 and 3 and 4 and. Going on to measure 3 starts off the same as measure 1, but just adds a couple extra notes. All that those notes are going to be is taking this ring finger and moving it up to fret 4, and then we're going to go up to fret 5 on the E string. Now, when I go up to this 5, I'm going to continue to move this ring finger up. It can be tempted to switch fingers or whatever else. We just want to keep that moving straight up the fretboard. So measure 3 looks something like this. 2 and 3 and 4 and. And then going into measure 4, we're going to play the 4 on the A string with our middle finger here. And then the 5 is still there. And then we're going to bring our pinky all the way up to 7 on the A. Then we take that off. Still there with the 4. And then the 5 on the E with the ring finger. So in time, measure 4 should sound something like this. 2 and 3 and 4 and. And measures 3 and 4 should sound something like this. 2 and 3 and 4 and. And at this point, it actually repeats, and it goes back to measure 1 and plays measures 1 and 2. But then, instead of going to measures 3 and 4, it's going to do the second ending. So measures 3 and 4 were the first ending. Measures 5 and 6 now are the second ending. And they're pretty simple. If you learned measures 3 and 4, 5 and 6 really aren't that bad. Just taking a look at measure 5, it's going to be the same little thing that we played on measure 1 and 3, and that's exactly the same as measure 3 because it goes to the 4 and 5, which is great. And then measure 6 is going to be exactly the same as measure 4, except a little bit less. All that happens on measure 6 is it plays the 4 on the A string, followed by the 5 on the E, followed by the 7 on the A with the pinky, just like measure 4 did, only when measure 4 played 2 extra notes beyond that, here on measure 6 we just hold. We just hold that 7 and let it ring. So measure 6 in time is something like this. 2 and 3 and 4 and. And measures 5 and 6, which sound very similar to 3 and 4 except for the end, should be something like this. 2 and 3 and 4 and. And at this point, it sort of ends this little feature and goes on now to measure 7, which is going to start with a D chord. Now to play this, what you're going to do is take your index finger, place it here on the 2nd fret of the C string. Go and pluck that. Middle finger here on the 2nd fret of the E string. Go and pluck that. Open on the A with your middle finger. And then 3 on the A with your ring finger and playing that with the middle. We're going to hold that for the rest of the bar. So it's actually the same rhythm as measures 1, 3, and 5 for that first part. And it just holds the 3 for the whole measure, just like measure 1 held this 3 for the whole measure. So measure 7 in time should sound something like this. 2 and 3 and 4 and. Going on to measure 8, still holding that 3 on the A for the first beat and a half. Then we're going to play that 3 on the A again. Same deal as before. Remember when we did the 2, 3, 2, 0 on measure 2? It's exactly the same thing here on measure 8, only instead of playing on the E string, we're playing it on the A string. But otherwise, it's exactly the same little riff. And it even goes up to the 2, just like measure 2 did. But instead of going to the 2 on the string before, it goes to 3 on the string before, meaning it goes to the 3rd fret on the E string. So to break that measure down, measure 8, you're going to play the 3 on the A, then you're going to play 2 on the A, hammer onto 3, pull off to 2, pull off to 0, put the 2 on with the middle finger on the A string, and then 3 on the E with the ring finger. So that measure in time sounds something like this. 2 and 3 and 4 and. And the 2 measures together, 7 and 8, should sound something like this. 2 and 3 and 4 and... Going into measure 9, we're going to play the same little opening riff that we did on 7, but then we're going to move up to 4 with our ring finger, and then 5 with our ring finger there on the A string. So we just slide that ring finger up from 3 to 4 to 5. So measure 9 in time should sound something like this. 2 and 3 and 4 and... Going into measure 10, I think measure 10 is probably the hardest measure of the song. You want to jump up here to 9 on the A string, but we want to use our index finger here. Pluck that 9. And the reason is because you're going to then want to have the middle finger here at 10 on the E string for this little D chord. And you're going to kind of mute your strings and do this little down up, mostly on the E and the A with this muted. So you pluck the 9 and then this nice little mute. To do that, I can just take these fingers and I can just sort of set them on the fretboard to create that nice muted sound, not pushing, not too light, but just touching, and get this nice little down, up, this mute, mute. And then right after we've done that mute, mute, we're going to play the 10 and 9 together on the E and the A. And then we're going to play the 9 and 8, just moving those down 1 fret. So a little bit tricky of a measure. It sounds something like this in time, really, really, really slow. Should be something like this. 2 and 3 and 4 and... And so that you can hear it measures 9 and 10 together, which really give you the feel for it. Should be something like this. 2 and 3 and 4 and... And from here, it jumps now back down to measure 11. And I say back down because measure 11 is going to be very familiar because it's exactly the same as measure 1. And measure 12 is exactly the same as measure 2. So in time, 11 and 12 should sound something like this. 2 and 3 and 4 and... As we go on to measure 13 now, 13 looks very similar because it's exactly the same as measures 3 and 5 were. And then measure 14 is a little bit different than what we've played to this point. What we're going to do here at measure 14 is we're going to play the 4 on the A string with the middle finger while we're still holding the 5. Then we're going to play the 5, and then we're going to come up to 7. So that is familiar to the same thing that we played on like measure 4 and measure 6. But then the way it changes a bit is we're now going to do a down up muted. So I'm going to take my fingers on my fretting hand. I'm just going to map them across the strings. I'm just going to kind of lightly touch them and do a down up muted. And while I do that, I'm moving to this chord shape. And this chord shape, it's a little tricky, but we're going to be playing 8 with the middle finger on the C string, 8 on the E string with our ring finger, and 6 here with the index finger on the A string. And I'm going to do a down on that, being careful not to hit the G string. So there's a couple different things you can do here. One is you can have your index finger just sort of start between these strings and strum down. The other is that you can take your thumb, wrap it around, and mute that G string if you want. Now I know this chord sounds completely wrong. It's because it's creating what's called chromatic tension. It wants to move down, but that's the end of this sort of phrase going into the next one. So measure 14, a little bit tricky because of that. Let's go ahead and hear what 13 and 14 sound like together to create that context. Should be something like this. 2 and 3 and 4 and... And it goes... That's the next section. Just, I can't not play it, right? It sounds so cool as you go through it, even though that 8-8-6 sounds so wrong. But so that we can hear it, the melody A, this is by far the longest part of the song. Let's go ahead and hear what this whole thing sounds like. That's going to be measures 1 through 14, including the repeat there on measure 4. Should be something like this in time, but nice and slow. 2 and 3 and 4 and... Now from here, we go on to melody B, and this is all a strummed part, but it's a low G strum part. What I mean by that is we have to be very careful to not boom that low G. In fact, we want to try to avoid it as much as we can. There's a couple ways to do this. I'm going to show you with each chord that we're playing. The first chord here is a G chord, 7-7-5 on the C, E, and A. It's the same thing that you played at the end of measure 16, just down one more fret. At the end of measure 14, what we learned that 8-8-6, same thing, just move down, 7-7-5. Now you can take your thumb and you can cross it over to mute that G string if you want, or you can try to be just very precise with your strumming. And the pattern that we're going to play here is going to go down and then a mute, which means I'm going to take the pressure off with all these fingers. So down, mute, and then up. I'm going to miss the strings going down, and then up, and then mute, mute. A little bit tricky, but a cool sound. Sounds something like this in time. 2 and 3 and 4 and... Going on to measure 16, we're going to go to this D chord, index finger bar across the E and A strings 5th fret, middle finger here on the 6th fret of the C string. And what I like to do is actually just fret the 7th fret on the G string, and then with that I'm going to lightly take the pressure off so that it's muted. So the only thing that's ringing is this 6-5-5, but if this ring finger accidentally compresses, it's not the end of the world because it is part of the D chord, but for the most part I'm just trying to keep it touching so that it's muting the string. And it's the same rhythm here. It's going to be that down, mute, up, mute, mute. Exactly the same rhythm, just now with this D chord instead. So measure 16 should sound something like this in time. 2 and 3 and 4 and measures 15 and 16 as a pair should sound something like this. 2 and 3 and 4 and... You hear I actually accidentally played a little bit of that 7 there, right? And then I backed off. It can be kind of cool when you sometimes incidentally hit it. And that's why I like to fret that, or at least have the finger there. But from here we go to the little first ending here, measure 17. We're going to play an A chord up the neck. It's exactly the same as the G chord that we just played, the 7-7-5. Just moved up 2 frets to 9-9-7. Exact same concept, everything's the same. The thumb is still going to be engaging to mute that G. And then we're going to go down, mute, up, mute, mute. Exactly the same rhythm that we did on 15 and 16. So in time, measure 17 with this A chord should sound something like this. 2 and 3 and 4 and then going on to measure 18, this one's pretty fun. We're going to do a down on this A chord. Then we're going to do a down, moving it down 1/2 step, creating what's called chromatic tension. And then we're going to move it back up 1 fret on the up strum. And then we're going to miss going down, come up, and then back down on the 8-8-6 to again create that tension. It's a really cool little riff. So 18 in time sounds like this. 2 and 3 and 4 and measure 17 and 18 should sound something like this together. 2 and 3 and 4 and from here, it repeats, goes back to measures 15 and 16, but then instead of going to 17 and 18, it goes on to measure 19. And on measure 19, which is the start of the second ending, we're going to play this different version of an A chord. I like to play it just like a G chord, middle finger on the 4th fret of the A string, ring finger on the 5th fret of the E string, and index finger crossing over to the 4th fret of the C string, right? Doesn't really matter which way you build it. They all lead to the same roll. We're going to do a down here, and you can use your thumb to mute the G. We're going to then mute, come up, and then we're going to pluck 4 on the C, which is your index finger is right there, and then 6 on the C with your ring finger, and then play the 6 on the C again, and immediately slide it to 7 on the C. So we're transitioning from a strum to more of the picking like what we were doing earlier in the song. So measure 19 should sound something like this. 2 and 3 and 4 and then going on to measure 20, we're going to continue picking. We're going to hold that 7 for beat 1, And then we're going to go down to 6 with our ring finger, just slide it down. And then 4 on the C with our index finger. And then we're going to play 6 on the G with our ring finger and immediately slide it to 7 on the G. And then we're going to play 6 on the G, just moving down that ring finger. And then we're going to play 4 on the G, and you're going to use your middle finger there for the 4. And there's a reason for that middle finger. It's because of what comes next. So just trust me, even though you might want to use the index, might feel more comfortable, go ahead and use that middle finger. But measure 20 should sound something like this. 2 and 3 and 4 and measure 19 and 20 should sound something like this together. 2 and 3 and 4 and so that you can hear it, here is all of melody B, which is going to be measures 15 through 20 with the repeat, mostly strumming. Should sound something like this. 2 and 3 and 4 and Now from this point, we are going to just go on to melody C, which is really just melody A again, which is kind of neat. So we're going to go down to our A chord down here. And if you remember, I told you to play that 4 on the C with your middle finger. The reason is because we slide it down to 2 on the G, and we start here with measure 21, which is exactly the same as measure 1. And we go on to measure 22, which is exactly the same as measure 2. So those two together should sound something like this. 2 and 3 and 4 and then we go on to measure 23, and 23 looks very familiar because 23 is exactly the same as measure 3 was. And then measure 24 should look very similar because it's exactly the same as what measure 4 was. So 23 and 24 together should sound something like this. 2 and 3 and 4 and at this point it repeats, goes back to measure 21 and 22. And then from here it goes to the second ending to kind of close out the tune. We're going to start with measure 25, which is exactly the same as like measure 3 was. Exactly the same that we played several times earlier. But then here at measure 26, it does change things up a bit. You're going to play 2 on the A string, and then you're going to play 3, and then 4, and then 5, and then 6, and then 7. So the way that we do this is we start by playing 2 with the index finger here, then 3 with the middle, 4 with the ring, 5 with the pinky, and then pinky gets a little extra, 6 and 7, both with the pinky. So measure 26 in time sounds and looks something like this. 2 and 3 and 4 and so measure 25 and 26 should sound something like this. 2 and 3 and 4 and going into the final measure of this, measure 27, slide your pinky all the way up to 12 on the A. Then play open on the A, then play 2 on the G. And that is all that there is to it. So measure 27 in time is something like this. 2 and 3 and 4 and just so you can hear the 3 final measures together, 25, 26, 27 should sound something like this. And a little tip, I like to kind of slide that pinky down after I play it. But let's go ahead and hear all of melody A now, which is, or melody C, but it's kind of melody A repeated, right? So this is measures 21 through the end, including the repeat in there. Should sound something like this. 2 and 3 and 4 and And there you have it. There is Fingerpicking Etude number 33, which practices pacing and space. You'll notice there's a lot of times where we play a note and it's like a dotted, dotted half note, which is worth, 3 beats, or a dotted quarter note worth 1.5. And combining these, there's lots of instances where you will be holding one note for as many as 4 beats. And that can be really intimidating when you're playing and practicing slow, because it's just sitting out there for so long. But that's okay, because that's what creates the drama and the intensity of those next parts. So work on giving it that space. Practice this with the metronome. Also, it works great with the playback. And yeah, as always, if you have any questions, feel free to leave them down in the comments below. And I'll look forward to seeing you all for the next lesson here on Rock Class 101. Thank you so much.
All right, guys, so this week's ukulele lesson was a lot of fun. We got to work on pacing and space in this etude, but I also think what was cool about it is that it had a little bit of strumming and a little bit of finger picking, so you get to also work on the best of both worlds in it as well. So guys, I wanted to give you a friendly reminder that if you did want to get the tabs to print off and keep for your records, that was available at this link right here, or you can go to the site rockclass101.com, do a search for Fingerpicking Etude number 33. Don't forget too, on that page was the really cool interactive on-screen tab viewer, so you can literally hit play, watch the tab scroll across in real time, highlight bars, loop sections, slow it down, all that fun jazz. So guys, again, I hope you enjoyed this lesson, and we will catch you in the next one. Take care.